Hello there, and welcome back to Scream with me. My name is Rusty, and this is my horror movie and heavy metal channel where I talk about my favorite music and my favorite movies. If you've never been here before, if you have, then you've heard that spiel many times. So we are now going to take another trip into Horrorland, and we are going to go back to 2011 where we are going to talk about a horror movie that I really love called Absentia. Now, Absentia was released in 2011. Now, this is one of the first horror movie directorial debuts, I guess you will, of Mike Flanagan. It was written and directed by Mike Flanagan. Mike Flanagan is known for Oculus, Ouija, Origin of Evil, both of which I have those, Gerald's Game, which I have, Doctor Sleep, which I have. So yeah, he is pretty well known as far as horror fare goes. Those are a few of his movies. And this is one of the first horror movies that he did. He did this before he did Oculus, which came afterwards. So let's get on with story time then. It was released in 2011. It stars, it was written and directed by Mike Flanagan, starring Katie Parker, Courtney Bell, and Dave Levine. Now, I love this movie. It's really good. It's really got some. I really like the jump scares in this movie. Got me pretty well. They're not overdone. There's not too many of them. They are perfectly well placed. But it's got a perfect balance between character development and story, and what the fuck horror. This is a creature feature, and it's a creature feature where you don't really get to see the creature that much. Hardly at all. There is a couple of jump scares in which you get an idea, but he kept it in the dark, where sometimes people wouldn't like that, but in this particular movie he does it in a way that is perfectly acceptable and okay. So we'll move on with the story. Let me tell you the story. It opens with Trisha. Yeah, okay. Our three main characters are Trisha, Callie, and Daniel. Now, Daniel is the husband of Trisha, and Callie is her sister. So the movie opens with Trisha replacing missing persons posters on, telephone poles and boards and stuff like that for her husband, Daniel, who has been missing for 7 years. And her sister Callie then shows up and is waiting for her on the door when she comes back from doing that. Waiting for her on the porch, I mean. She has came because since it's been 7 years, Trisha is doing the final paperwork to have her husband declared dead by Absentia. Hence the title of the movie. Absentia, gone. So Callie has come to help her comes to grips with and terms with this final act of having her husband, who just disappeared, declared dead. And that's how it all begins. So we are also introduced to the other main character of this movie, which isn't a person. It's not a person, it's a tunnel. If you've ever been in big cities or stuff like that, sometimes there's a tunnel that goes under the street, and they're big. It's not like, I mean, they're actually made for foot travel. So this tunnel connects this neighborhood to the rest of the city, and there's a big park on the other side of it. So, it's not a cave. It's not out of the way. It's actually just a city tunnel that you walk through to get from one neighborhood to another one. And that's the other main character of the movie, actually. So, Callie is told about it, and Trisha, of course, Alicia had come back through it, and that's how she got introduced to it. This is where they live, so um, he kind of lets you know that that tunnel is important from the very beginning, but you're not, you know, really sure what, when, why, or how, but that it is. And we have I don't know, maybe a good 20 minutes where we get introduced to Alicia, where we get introduced to Callie, where we sort of understand, that Callie has had some issues with running off. She's had some drug issues. And of course, her sister Alicia has been dealing with the disappearance of her husband for 7 years now. So, there you go with that. Now, interestingly, as she gets closer and closer to getting this death certificate, getting him declared dead, she begins to have visions. She begins to see her husband, and he looks angry, and he looks hurt. And we've also been introduced to the fact that Alicia's pregnant. Looks about 6 months, 6.5 months, somewhere right there. Well, her husband's been got missing for 7 years, so it certainly isn't his. So you've got that little question in your mind. And Callie, of course, has that question as well. Who's that? And as the story goes along, you do find out who it is. So Alicia is dealing Trisha. Am I going to do that again? Didn't I just do that in a video where I just got stuck on a name? But Trisha is dealing with these visions that keep getting more and more disturbing. It's her husband, and he's like appearing at her bedside. He's like, and they're very lucid. So she goes to a psychiatrist to ask about it, and of course it makes total sense, she's about to have him declared dead, which is the final give up, right? In a situation like that, that's the final thing that you do to end the whole ordeal. So it's kind of natural that she would see visions of him being angry. After all, she is pregnant with someone else's baby. She's about to declare him dead. So it all kind of makes sense in that aspect. Now, we finally figure out also that the baby, that the father of the baby is the detective, the last detective that has worked the case for a couple of years of her missing husband. So, Callie has been hearing some weird sounds as well in the house, and she has had some incidents in the tunnel. For instance, she was running through it coming back from the park. She goes on a run every day. She's coming back through it after running through the park, and she sees what she believes to be like a homeless type person laying there. And as she gets close to him, she can tell that he's very gaunt, very malnourished looking, and it looks like he's been physically abused. And he wakes up as she walks by him, and he cries out to her for help, and she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry for waking you up, I'll try to get you something to eat." And he seems shocked that she's talking to him, and he says to her, "You can see me?" And so that kind of makes you go, what did he just say? And then she's like, yes, sir. I'll try to help you. I don't have nothing on me. I'll try to help you. And he had said that, you can see me. And then he started going, please, 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 I have a son. My name is Walter, and I have a son. His name is Jamie. Can you please tell him that, please tell my son I love him and stuff like that. And okay. So she didn't really pay much attention to it because she just took it as, homeless person mumbling or something. So she didn't really pay much attention to it. She did think of it later that night, though, and asked her sister for a Tupperware bowl, and then she went and left. She wasn't there in the tunnel, so she just left the Tupperware bowl with food there. Now, a couple of days later, she came back to the house, and there was like this stack, this little pile of trinkets, keys, mostly keys and stuff like that, little trinkets. And she gathered them up, she looked over there at the tunnel, and she was like, what is this? And because she had seen little trinkets in that tunnel that she was running through, she assumed it was from there. So she went and took them back. And another boy walks up while she's doing that, and he's like, I wouldn't do that if I was you. Don't leave that there. And she's like, well, they're not mine. I was just giving them back to, I'm assuming it's people from the park over there. And but it's not mine. They're not mine. So I'm just giving it back. And he's like, I wouldn't do that if I were you. And he lays down a little duffel bag type thing, and he leaves. Once again, she doesn't really think anything about it. She leaves the stuff there, and she goes on back to the house. Now, like I said, the hallucinations or the visions that Trisha keeps having are getting worse, and now they've actually got the death declaration finished. The fact that the baby is the detective's is now come out as well. So now that the cat's out of the bag, he's been declared dead. They have the death certificate. She's going to go out on an official date with, the detective. So they get ready for the date that night, and as they're leaving, she sees a vision of her husband standing there, Daniel, standing there in the road. And it really catches you off guard because she's been seeing these visions and she's been ignoring them. Like when she sees one, she'll just close her eyes and ignore it. And instead, this time, Callie's standing at the door watching her sister leave on her date. The detective is walking by her. She sees the vision of her husband standing there in the road, and she closes her eyes like she's done here in the last few weeks, ignoring the vision. And then all of a sudden you notice, about the same time she does, that the detective suddenly goes, oh my God. And so she looks at him, and he's looking at Daniel. It's real. He's really standing there. Her husband that's been missing for 7 years is standing there. And he is all like beat up and abused, bruises and stuff like that. So she starts to faint. Callie freaks out. The detective freaks out. They call, they get him to the hospital, where they find that he has been like extremely malnourished. He has got animal bones in his stomach, which means he's eaten, obviously, rats or something. And he has been severely abused. He's got severe PTSD trauma and stuff like that. And so over the next few days, they're trying to figure out, where have you been? What, where have you been? And Callie tries talking to him, and he's acting really, really, as you can imagine. It's like he's been somewhere being severely tortured for 7 years. So you can imagine what his mental state is, and he keeps, it's not when they first brought him back from the hospital, he looked towards the tunnel and peed on himself. So stuff like that was going on as Callie and Trisha try to get answers out of him, try to, make him feel better. And especially Callie, she is wanting him to talk to her, like, you know, can you tell me what happened? And he speaks in these weird riddles that she doesn't exactly understand. And one of them was that he informs her that you shouldn't have traded with him. You shouldn't have traded with it because now it wants you. And you're like, what the fuck does that mean? you know, because like I said, she's been hearing this weird insect type noise, like you would, or it's an animalistic noise. It's kind of like a chirping, like a cricket, mixed with a squirrel kind of thing is the noise that you hear. And she wakes up, and he's sitting on her bed, and he's looking at Three Billy Goats Gruff, the kids' book, and he starts talking about how that's not how it really looks, talking about the underneath. And the cops couldn't get anything out of him about where he had been, and neither can they. And then she tells him, hey, dude, you're like really traumatized. You need to go back and to the bedroom and wait for Trisha to come back. Who was outside, by the way, with the detective sitting in the car going, what the fuck do we do now? And, because they were just starting to see each other, and that's his baby she's carrying. And so he's like, no, I don't want to go back in there because it's in the wall. Did he say one of them or it's? He may have said one of them's in the wall or it's in the wall. I just watched it, but little things, okay? Cut me a slack, cut me a break, yeah, okay. But so about the time he says that, you start hearing noises and like slamming and stuff like that. And Mike Flanagan was really good at keeping this thing, you saw something, but you're not really sure what it is. And next thing you know, you hear all of this calamity. And Trisha and the detective get out of the car, and they go and they see the front door standing open, and the detective starts to pull his gun, but then you hear Callie screaming coming from the tunnel, and she runs up and says he's gone. And then she tries to tell them what happened, and then they show you what happened. And that thing got him. That creature of some kind, it's some kind of creature, and it got him and drug him to the tunnel. And Callie had followed, trying to save him, trying to stop it. And that's where, we stand now. Daniel has been taken again. And one of the sad things about that was that she had called his parents. The wife, Trisha, had called the parents and told them that he had returned. They had jumped on a plane, and she wasn't able to stop them. So that next day, after the cops had come to try to figure out what happened to him, and of course nobody believes Callie, because she tells the story, and nobody believes her. They accuse her of being on drugs and stuff. But the parents come the next day where Trisha has to take them into the living room and say he's gone again. Their son, who has been missing for 7 years, is now gone again. So that was sad. And now Callie is left under suspicion. They of course don't believe her story that some critter of some kind had gotten Daniel and took him back to the tunnel. So her and her sister have a fight about it because her sister doesn't believe her either, and accuses her of being on drugs. And they make up later that night. And when it comes time to start going to bed, she comes down there and tells her what she has discovered. Because after she had a fight with Trisha when Daniel was taken, she went upstairs and started looking through the missing persons reports online. And because she was like trying to remember that guy's name that she had, the homeless guy that she thought was the homeless guy. So, she remembered the son's name, and she started, trying to remember his name, and she ended up remembering his name, and also discovered that masses amounts of people from that area over the last 100 years had disappeared in this area, going all the way back 100 years ago. So something was going on. She found that the Walter guy, that he had disappeared like a whole lot more than 7 years ago. She ends up going down there and explaining all of this to her sister, which is still like, you're just reaching for straws, She still don't believe her, and, she kind of convinces her a little bit, but not completely. And we'll talk about it tomorrow. So they start going up the stairs, and Callie is like at the top of the stairs, and Trisha is still down at the bottom coming. And they begin to hear this noise. And she stops, and Trisha stops. And they're like, what is that noise? And Callie is like, that's it, that's it. And just about that time, Trisha gets taken in this cool, scary jump scare scene. And now Daniel's gone, Trisha's gone. The police are all over Callie. Of course, they can't prove anything. I mean, mainly because she hasn't done anything. But of course, they do not believe the story. She's telling the story again, this time about her own sister has disappeared and is now missing. So the next day comes. Callie doesn't know what to do. The next day comes, and they hear all kinds of ambulances and sirens and stuff like that. And she goes out and sees all this commotion over there at the tunnel. And when she gets over there, that Walter guy is laid there, all crushed up. And the son, remember I told you that earlier in the movie, that boy had walked up when she was putting the trinkets down, and he had a little duffel bag and had told her she shouldn't be doing that. He starts walking up, and he starts screaming and running through the cops and running through the evidence tape and all, because that's his dad. That was his son that he had mentioned to her way back in the movie, Jamie. So this boy was Walter's son, who had warned her about that. And so the cops tackle him and get him down, and when they look in the bag, there's a little missing terrier, a little terrier dog, which means that he had been obviously bringing food for the people held prisoner or whatever by this creature. So that's probably why, right? That's probably why Daniel, when they had him in the hospital, had animal bones in his stomach. So Jamie said in the interrogation that I told you my dad wasn't dead. And they're like, well, tell us the story. And he's like, no, you're not going to believe it. Just let me go. There's nothing that I can do, and now I have to bury my dad. But I told you he wasn't dead. Well, there's really nothing they could do to him at the time. However, they did let him know that all of these missing animals and break-ins where animals were stolen, that they were going to try to link him to it, or that they could probably link him to it. And if they couldn't, oh well, but that they kind of figured that he was the one doing it. And he didn't admit it, but he sort of was like, well, whatever. I've just got to bury my dad now. It's all over. Whatever it is, it's over. So Callie took that to heart and started realizing that whatever this thing was, it now has her sister and her brother-in-law, and she's being blamed for it, and she feels kind of guilty for it, although there's no reason that I can see why you would feel guilty for it. She didn't do anything. As a matter of fact, she tried to tell people and nobody would believe her. Yeah. So, she was like, well, I can't do anything about that. Nobody believes me. So she put all of the evidence that she had gathered into a folder, into like a manila, and put the detective's name on it. And, basically said, there's nothing else I can do, but I want to be with them, I want to try to save them. I'm the only one that knows what's going on. Nobody believes me, so I'm going to go do what I can. Now, he didn't really know what that meant, but there was all of the evidence about all these missing people from this area over the last 100 years. And then she went to the tunnel. And you don't really know what's going to happen, It's like, is she going to fight this creature? What is she going to do? So she gets to the tunnel and basically just starts yelling out, trade? Because remember that boy had told her, or Daniel had told her that, you shouldn't have come down here and traded. And I think her leaving that food is what attracted that creature. She, whatever it thought, but it took that as a sign, and it traded back with her, you see. The creature traded back with her those trinkets, and then she gave the trinkets back again to the tunnel, and the tunnel then came after Daniel to take him back. So I guess the way you could look at it is, what they say about when you gaze upon evil, evil will gaze back upon you. It's sort of like, if you keep your head down and don't get noticed by the bad things won't notice you. And so I think that's what Mike Flanagan did, was he played off that, it probably wouldn't have messed with her if she hadn't have taken an interest in the tunnel, tried to help one of its victims when she tried to help Walter, and brought food and left it. Because see, that boy Jamie, he knew never to go in that tunnel. He never got close to that tunnel. um, other than, to lay the stuff there, but he never went through it like she did, like Callie did. So I think that's what Jamie meant when he told her, I wouldn't do that, I wouldn't leave that there. And that is, don't get noticed. And when she traded food, and it traded the trinkets back for the food, and then, or it could have been the people, right? It could have been the people that gave the trinkets back in trade for the food that she had left for them. That's a good theory as well. But either way, whether it was her actions that made the people know she was sensitive enough to see them, to know they were there, and so she caught his attention of the creature, or whether it was giving the food and the creature took it. Whatever it was, she got noticed by the creature, and the creature wanted her. So she came to the tunnel, and maybe is going to try, because based on the beliefs that she said that she got from the evidence she collected, she believed the people were being held hostage in some kind of underground dimension or something, and being used as for whatever evil purposes, slave labor, abuse, whatever it was. So maybe she thought that she was going to try to work from the inside to get out, but for whatever reason, she went to the tunnel and offered herself up. And it took her. And now she was missing too. So the movie closes out with the two detectives, the one that had the baby with her, that she was pregnant by, and his partner, sitting around going over theories as to why these two, where's Daniel, where had he been, now where are they gone, coming up with the scenarios that we all do about missing people. Maybe they're alive somewhere, maybe they did it on purpose, maybe they're not dead, maybe they are on a beach in Mexico, or maybe they changed their name and are living, if your loved one goes missing, you're going to come up with 1,000 scenarios that keep them alive. They were a CIA agent, and now their cover's blown, but they check on you every once in a while. But you don't want to admit that they're gone and dead. And that's kind of what this movie was based around. So it ends with the detectives doing that. She had a drug history problem, Callie. Trisha had said to the detective that she knew how to live off the land, and she would sometimes just disappear to get away, because sometimes you just wanted all this to go away and start over. So the detectives are talking about these different theories as to why they're missing. You, of course, know why they're missing. And the detective did have all that evidence that she left, so he does end up, the final scene, he does end up going and standing at the tunnel entrance and kind of staring in that direction, because when he was across the street, he thought he saw Callie standing at that tunnel. So he had walked over to the entrance to the tunnel, and there was nothing in there. He could see all the way to the other end, and he just looked at it really funny. And then the film switched perspective to Callie looking back at him in a sort of blurry, distorted way. She was wherever that invisible place was, and he couldn't see her, but she was looking back at him. and he gives a funny look at the tunnel and walks off, and that's how that movie ends. So, this is one hell of a movie. I really loved the storyline. It was something new, something I've not seen or heard before. I liked the way it played on the missing 411. You know about missing 411. I liked the way it played on that line of thought. Where are all the missing people? We know some of them are dead. We know some have left on their own. But where are all of those that are just gone? Like, if you go and watch the missing 411 shows or read the missing 411 books, these people are just gone. And when they do show back up, like Daniel showed back up, when they do show back up, it don't make no sense. And when Daniel showed back up after 7 years, he still had his wallet in his pocket, was still wearing the same clothes that he had disappeared in. So I really think that Absentia, I really think this movie plays on the 411 phenomenon. And as we know from Dr. Sleep and Oculus and stuff like that, Mike Flanagan is just a good director. And he's a good writer when it comes to horror movies. So, yeah, that was my little story time on Absentia. As usual, I found this on eBay for less than a tenner. And so could you, if you want it. Collecting really isn't as expensive as you think. This is a fantastic movie. And yeah, you should find it. It does say watch on Prime Video. Let me see if there's any watch options for it. AMC Plus, Prime Video, Tubi. So maybe it's on that Tubi place if you can handle commercials. I don't know. But yeah, Mike Flanagan, Absentia, 2011. It's the movie he did right before Oculus. Katie Parker, Courtney Bell, and Dave Levine. Yes. So I will see you in the next one, hopefully. Love you, miss you, bye. And let me know what you think about this movie. Try to see it if you can. I just told you the watch options. You can always find them the same way by going to Vudu and looking, or going to International Movie Database and looking at the watch options. I think Letterboxd has that too. I'm not sure, but yeah. Absentia by Mike Flanagan. Check it out. So, be careful, though. He who looks into the face of evil has evil looking right back at you. Don't let it notice you. Shh. But keep screaming. Very loud. When appropriate. Love you, miss you, bye. See you in the next one.